Test 1, 2, 3.
Dude, you have to be more jazbati. Like, have you been to
But
khutbahs at the masjid? They're
the
always loud
Jazbat
and
comes out in
angry.
The
person.
khutbah, musalla khutbah, man. I can't tell you how much I miss the musalla khutbah.
I wish there was like feedback forms, like rate my khutbah. It's like rate my professor, rate my sermon.
You guys are underestimating how brutal uncles and aunties can be. Because I think every time they'll just be like, unhappy, unhappy,
Savage.
unhappy.
They're just savage.
Like,
Hey everyone, welcome to Nonsense. My name is Abud Mirza. I am your host. Think of Nonsense as a show for dads to open up and talk freely about what it means to be a dad. I'll be joined by Twiddledee and Twiddledum, as usual, Sajid and Imad. We generally have a South Asian flavor on things. So we tend to overshare, overthink, and we occasionally make fun of each other. So join us for the ride. It'll be a fun one as we stumble through all this nonsense. So with that, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
thank you. Here we
Okay.
are.
Let's go.
Here we are.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, does someone want to explain what a khutbah is?
Isn't it closer to a sermon where every Friday we go to Jummah? It's like going to church and you get to listen to. I think usually it's about 20 minutes or so. It's not that long.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
And-
sometimes you get the overachievers that like
Yeah.
will go for like 30, 40 minutes and everyone starts like getting antsy. But yeah.
Totally. But I think the
That's
very
the one
like,
thing I think the community has improved on over the last 40 years, 30 years. It's like
yeah.
they got so much pressure to condense it down to the solid 20.
Yeah. Because I've been to khutbahs in Pakistan and other places, and it's just the variance. This is what bothers me: is the variance is just too high. Like for the Erics of the world, like it's just
Sorry.
who are we?
Eric, as much as we love you, we do have to give out a shout out to George. We called out Trevor last
Wow.
time, so this time it'll be George.
Okay, so for Georges of the world, I think it's interesting that there are khutbahs that we go to where it's just straight up somebody yelling about random stuff that is just completely off the rails.
It reminds me of Homer's dad. The old man just like yelling crazy stuff. Just so
But
random.
like it's like a Desi version of Alex Jones is sometimes like on one hand, and like this straight up conspiracy theory is being spewed out, and on the other hand, you're like,
But,
okay,
but to be clear, I don't think there was a single khutbah you've been to where they said that school shootings are fake. In terms of yelling uncles, a lot of young guys are also resorting to that like yelling style because they're so like passionate. Like that resonates for some of the audience. It must,
yeah,
because those
yeah,
people are
it must.
doing it so much.
Does that resonate for you guys?
Hell no.
No, I mean, I think like
But just tune them out. Salman's asking why our good khutbah is actually that exciting. And I gotta say, like, this does get at me. When I go to khutbahs where it's enriching, I really walk out feeling like
Totally.
okay, inspired and like just like
Yeah.
connected.
and I
and
need
then-
that
Yeah.
inspiration once a week. Like that's what
Yeah,
gets me
that's the whole
excited.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will drive a little bit farther if I have to like get that because I think it's so valuable. I think the big shift I saw Imad over the years is essentially like I remember when I was younger, there would be a lot of discussion about hellfire and
Totally.
how you'll end up in hellfire and how bad it is and like the very like you are headed there if you don't approach. And now it's
I'm pretty
much
sure they were
more-
saying that just to you.
No, yeah, that was actually one-on-one sessions that I used to. That was my madrasa session. Oh my God, I have some stories from my madrasa. When I
Wait,
was
You went
were
to
part of-
Madrasa, like
no, not madrasa.
You were part of a wait, hold on.
God, here we go. No, I read the
What
Quran
were you training for?
at the mosque. We have to edit this shit out, dude. I'm gonna get in
yeah,
trouble.
literally on YouTube, you'll have.
No, I have a story from when I read the Quran with the Imam of the masjid, and so I guess Quran classes is what that's called.
Why did that come out so awkward? Like,
So I have stories, so many stories from my Quran teacher. And one of them was one time we were up in like this upstairs attic, tiny little room with a fan, and I'm trying to read. He's like correcting me. My ears are all burning red and stuff, and he'd be like, you know, read it correctly. Pankhe se latka dunga. I'm gonna hang you from the fan.
My God.
And I still remember that, dude. It was like, holy crap! Like you're gonna hang me from the fan?
But look at your qirat now, man. You're so good.
My kiddos are great. Yeah.
So I have to tell you guys this story from my khutbah recently here. They had to make an announcement. They're like, hey, guys, we've been getting a lot of complaints about our security guards. They always wear like those like camo like things. A lot of people were complaining that they thought ICE was at the Masala. And they're like, no, we
Shoot.
hired these people in case ICE shows up. So that to
Shows
make
up.
yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
hilarious. Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah. But it's funny that they make
it's
this
a weird
announcement.
time, right?
Weird
It's a
time.
weird time for all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's a weird time. I think there's a lot of emotions, and I think that's why I enjoy our conversations so much is we're actively trying to take a break from all those things and have like a casual conversation that's, sometimes semi-serious and out of the blue and complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Pun intended, in case it wasn't clear.
It was very clear.
Okay. Well, let's move on. We have a big show. Was that necessary, Sajid? Was that like, is this dinner time? What What are we doing?
You're eating during the
Hungry,
podcast?
man.
You're eating during the show?
I heard it makes for good podcasting.
Like, I feel bad enough for drinking water. You're like, let me just have a chomp.
You guys should be happy I'm not like unwrapping.
It's really awkward. Please don't do it. So, main topic tonight, we're going to touch on the topic of belonging. And what does belonging actually look like?
Wow. Heavy.
Heavy, I know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I guess my first question is, belonging's sort of a loaded term. What does that mean to you?
Emma, do you want to take this while I think about it?
Yeah. I've thought a lot about this because I grew up in Pakistan and had a lot of cousins from the US. And I would have these deep conversations with them in my late teen years. I predicted that they would struggle with belonging. And I felt the same as I moved to the US. I was like, this is going to become a big deal, like a sense of belonging and how it manifests itself in different parts of our lives. And it became an even bigger deal when 9/11 happened for me. I don't know if you guys felt the same way. Like 9/11 really like made it feel like, oh, this is going to be a big, big gap to fill. And obviously this is a spectrum. We don't talk about politics too much, but the Obama election, no matter which side you're on, like it just was a very inspiring moment that as an American, you can belong here no matter where you come from. I think had a huge impact. So I don't know. I want to hear so you guys were born and raised here. So what do you guys think about it?
Yeah, I think you touched on some really like major moments, like same moments for me growing up. But I think I've felt much more welcomed, and a lot of the issues of belonging were oftentimes things that was playing in my head more than what was happening to me in real life, because I also got really lucky. I think,
Mhm.
I've been in places and situations where I've been surrounded by good people. And I think that's just like just being really fortunate. For me, a lot of it is like, what does your immediate neighborhood feel like? And what are the people like? How are they treating you? Thinking back on it, like, has been very overwhelmingly positive. So I feel really, really fortunate for that.
For me, if I were to simplify it, it's have you found your people? And I think as you go through life, there are different versions of you, right? And that as people enter your life, you adjust, right? When I was married, I was a different person. And then when you add kids, you kind of adjust and change. And, belonging changes over time. It's not just
Totally.
one thing, right? So that's sort of how I view
It's
it.
another, I think you're bringing up such an interesting concept because we all live different chapters of our lives. And as those chapters change, you may feel belonging in some chapters and other chapters you're trying to fit in. I recently met up with one of my high school friends I hadn't seen in like more than a decade. He had also evolved and moved to a different countries, lived a different life, but we like were able to get back along very much from where we left off. And you could feel that like I didn't have to put up any mask to hang out with my friend. But there is another 50% of my friends I went to high school with that I would have to switch back into this very like different version of myself that I was back in high school in order to like fit in.
I think a lot of it is around where you can show up without pretense. So I feel like I had a really big moment of finding community and belonging. Like you guys, of course, know that I lost my mom just a few weeks ago. And the way that I had people show up for me, like, was very poignant. People that that I see every day, like you guys, and the way you guys showed up, all the way through to like people I hadn't seen for years, and like the way they showed up. And like, I think when you have that, I think like there's this like this moment really like helped me realize like the value of community, of like, feeling like you belong and feeling like you're accepted. And like, people show up and say things that like they never would have before, right? Like things that they appreciate, or like, I don't know, like things that they observed. And it's like you, like maybe for the first time ever, I felt seen in a way that like I didn't know existed. So I think that's like an example of, for me, like belonging turns into something really like kind of like so deeply connected to your human relationships and like your sense of self. So I think being seen in that way without pretense is probably like the biggest kind of realization that
Hmm.
I think that's like such a big part of managing life today, is like finding those people that you can connect with at such a deep level that they show up for you when obviously things are going well, but they also show up for you when, maybe it's some of your darkest days. And I think that, really defines like friendship. I think it defines manhood. I think some of
Hmm.
that tends to get lost in like our social media and digital worlds of today.
I think that's spot on. This fact that you bring up around social media, because like so much of our world is virtual, and so much of our world is like places where you have to be performative because it's a part of the thing, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just what it is. But in real life, when people are connecting, like I think that's where real belonging happens, like, and it's like all that
Yeah.
pretense goes away.
All right. So belonging is an interesting topic in and of itself and deserves more time. But, obviously, given the presence of Ramadan that's coming up, I wanted to tie belonging into Ramadan. Like, how does belonging play into it? What's happening in Ramadan? What's the difference of Ramadan from when we
Are
were
we doing a
celebrating
khutbah
it
now?
as
Is this a
kids?
khutbah?
Ramadan is a beautiful month of blessings, prayer, and dates.
You like the main thing is fasting, dude. Like you should have said that.
Yeah, you should have led with fasting.
Okay. Well, since you brought it up, please enlighten us on how are we fasting and what are we fasting for?
So first thing that you need to know is like you can't have sex during Ramadan or like during the fasting time, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what else. There's some other
That's
things.
where you started.
I don't know what else.
That's
There's some other things you can't do either. Oh, you
well,
can't.
it's okay, Ahmad. It's not like you
People
can
are
move fast
flexible on
anywhere,
other
so-
stuff, but this one's like for sure you can't do.
What other things are people are like okay having
I
like
know
a
people. I've heard
like
people
having some
who will be
carrots? Like, what do you mean they're
So, like,
flexible on other stuff?
I know people are like, I do fasting, but like I can't stop drinking the water. I have to do the water.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
I've never
legit.
heard that.
Legit. Like I have heard that.
Who are you hearing this
I have
from?
hung out with too many people, obviously, right? Like, but
It's like
at this
it's these are the people he feels like he belongs with. The
Yeah,
ones that
like,
like make the exception.
yeah, like I hear that.
I want you to think about Ramadan back then versus now. Like, it felt like Ramadan used to be simpler, and now it feels like it's much more produced.
I was talking to my wife about this, and she's like, it used to be called Ramazan, and now it's called Ramadan, and that's your dad joke for the day. I'm like, all right, I'll make sure I mention that.
Wow. Okay. Just for our listeners, the difference there being Ramadan coming from the Arabic term, so there's, a D in there, and then Ramzan is more of the Persian Urdu influence, so they changed the D to a Z. But all
What year
preference,
did that
all the
happen? I
same.
don't remember. I don't even remember.
I don't really know.
Yeah. But it
Yeah.
definitely was a shift because I don't remember it being called Ramadan growing up.
Well, I think there's this like whole Arabification of Muslim desis, right? Like before everyone said Khuda Hafiz, and now it's like Allah Hafiz. And it's like, now you say Assalamu alaikum or Fi amanillah or something, right? Like it's very
Yeah.
like desis are, I think desis have a chip on their shoulder and are like, trying to be more Arab.
How are you doing your Ramzans now versus how'd you do them before?
How were you doing your Ramzans before? And how
He was having sex
differently?
before. Now he's not having sex. I think it's very clear. He's answered the question. Ahmed can't take a hint, dude. He just like keeps coming back to the same damn question.
I'm curious, guys. I'm just curious,
So when you say water, okay, I think like the big shift in Ramzan is, I think when we were growing up, it was like everything was assumed and now everything is curated. So what I mean by that is when we were younger, our parents were kind of like, yeah, they kind of assume we will kind of follow this religion and do the practices just because that's who we are. Like that's our identity. And I think for the three of us and a lot of people, that worked. For a lot of people, it didn't work. But I think now it's much more curated because since we grew up here, like we recognize that as first generation American Muslim, like we have to be thoughtful about what our kids are going to experience as it relates to Ramadan, what we want to highlight, what we want them to be excited about, what we, want to like really make into a big festive thing, and other things that are like, maybe gonna like not resonate for them, right? It's like the khutbah thing. Like,
Mhm.
like what message, what version of this message are you providing? I think that it's become much bigger and like much more of a thing. I think it's like it's good in the aggregate. Yeah, there's some people or some things that are like are extra or whatever, but like the community's got bigger, like the festivities are getting bigger. So I think all those things are positives.
Are you in the camp of, hey, we're overdoing it, or are we just better organized and more,
Yeah.
thoughtfulness behind it?
Yeah, for overall, I'm in camp too. I think that we are a larger community now, many more masjids. Like the more masjids you build, the more communities you create, the more people will like find their community and engage, and people are engaging in different ways. Like, do I think that some of the like suhoor stuff or some of the iftars are over the top? Well, of course, but to each their own. Like,
You're the one that's like begging to go to Sahur Fest and all these things. So I don't know what you're complaining about.
driving my minivan at 10 p.m. Hop
was
on in.
one of the most fun like minivan trips I've had. Like
That was so
I
much
don't
fun.
know.
That was so
Iman,
great.
tell the audience what happened on that
Yeah,
trip.
please.
Like we tried to actually go to a festival, and there's a line. There's like 4 blocks or something like that. That's true.
Okay.
It was also very
you
clear
guys
that
need to add some. You guys need to add some
you
context.
add the
Okay.
sizzle. Why don't you add the sizzle, buddy?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
So over the last few years, for Ramadan to build community, a lot of people have started holding these like Sahur fests, basically the meal that you eat before you fast. People meet up in large parking lots. They have food trucks and all this stuff. Generally, it's geared towards like a bunch of 20-year-olds, for people to mingle, hang out with their friends.
Like Tinder, but in like real life.
But the context being that a bunch of like 35 to 40-year-old men jump into a minivan and drive an hour.
My minivan, specifically.
Only to find it's definitely not our demographic. Yeah, complete mess.
But
So then we end up at a Middle East.
pretty ironic for what Ramadan's supposed to be about.
Well, it is like people are trying to find community and belonging. So I don't fault them. But yeah, I do agree that some of that stuff can get a bit performative. But okay, go on.
We're at the Middle Eastern restaurant, and sure enough, somebody in our group has the name Muhammad, and everybody who's ordering has the same name. And this is the fastest service we've ever received. It showed up literally in like 10 minutes, and we're like, wow,
Well,
this is amazing.
Because the
Turns
Muhammad
out-
in our group was in the bathroom, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, Muhammad's right here. It's us." When the food was ready.
So wait, did we take someone else's food?
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
For sure. Because
Wow.
then they were announcing our Muhammad's name for the next like hour.
Wait, so did you take that food also then?
No, we're not animals.
It's like, this is great. Let's eat our
We're like,
food.
this is amazing. This place is no wonder it has
Yeah.
great reviews. We
Yeah.
love it.
Other thing that might have changed, in my opinion. So the primary idea is you're fasting. You're not eating or drinking throughout the day. And the conception that most people would have is that, oh, it's like a weight loss program that's built into your year. And it certainly is not. For me, it's like Pakora Fest. Like I literally cannot keep my hands off pakoras during Ramadan.
I do want to point out to our viewers and our fans that the irony of Sajid drinking and eating while we're talking about fasting
Dude,
is sort of,
I think
I
he's just
mean,
preparing.
you
It's
can
like
eat
he's
at
a
night, guys.
prepper. Yeah.
You can eat at night. It's nighttime right now when I'm recording.
I mean, you
don't
can have
see-
sex at night too. It doesn't mean that
Whoa.
you should go have it here.
Wow.
Like,
It's
na
not that
salam na
type of
dua
show.
sida.
I'm not feeling like I belong right now at all. Oh, man.
I do want to say, like, in my college years and early 20s, there was, obviously it's like the prehistoric era before social media, but, I think it was harder to find belonging then. And, the Islamic Center at NYU did a really great job of curating a space that was sort of modern, liberal, progressive, but also rooted in Islamic principles and teachings. So you got both worlds. And I think that experience is so uniquely New
Yeah.
York and so different. Um, everyone tends to live obviously in a bubble, but like the IC, and it was called IC. The IC did such a great job of creating that community and space at a time when, post 9/11, the world was pretty scary for Muslims. So, they created a safe space and made sure that there was food and laughter and just safety for everyone. And I actually met my wife at one of those iftars, and that's when we
Whoa.
started talking.
Told you it's a Tinder
Amazing.
in real life.
It's
Yeah.
the Tinder in real life.
I do think those types of institutions should get a lot of credit. Similarly, MSAs on many campuses, including at UCLA when I was an undergrad
Yeah.
there, like was such a good way to connect. And then later, I think for me, there was an Islamic center in LA. It's like one of the two oldest Islamic centers in the whole metro area. And my wife and I started going there soon after we got married. And that was like another big moment for me. Like we met friends there who we're still friends with. And, we had like took classes there. It was similarly very diverse. And I think that's what made it special. They encouraged discourse and like different points of view. I think this goes to faith and belonging. And for me, at least, they're, hand in hand. At different points in your life, you need a different type of way to connect.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's very emotional or visceral, or sometimes more intellectual, and sometimes it's more maybe spiritual. It might be academic. Like it's kind of like finding what works for you in that phase of your life, and then taking advantage of it. So
Like at different stages of our lives, Ramadan has played a different role. Now that we have kids, it plays a very different role than it
Yeah.
did when we were younger.
Yeah. So I guess on that point, how are you treating Ramadan now, thinking about your kids, right, and your families? Like how has Ramadan changed in that perspective?
This is going to be the first year that our son's going to do his first fast, so we're excited about that.
Amazing.
Right? Like it's
inshallah,
gonna
that's
be,
awesome.
yeah. So it should be good. It's always good when it's closer to winter time. I thought that was what you were asking about. Like, how has it changed? I'm like, yeah, it used to be in the winter, then it was in the summer again. Now it's
Yeah.
in the winter again.
Now it's back in the winter.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of works out, right? We had it in the winter when we were kind of in those formative teenage years, and I think
Yeah.
our kids will too. And
Yeah.
that actually helps a lot.
That helps big
Yeah.
time.
Big time.
Big time.
They're like, this is easy. This is easy. And wait till it ends at 9 p.m. every day.
Yeah, I feel like Ramadan has become more and more enriching, and inshallah it continues to be like that as we get older, or as I get older. I think the intentionality is really high with when you have kids. It's an opportunity to educate, but also like an opportunity to just like create this like lovely family experience, right? Like the shared dua or shared prayers, and then like obviously the meal. and then extending that to like the community stuff. The community aspect has really developed or matured for us on a personal level because we came out of that like really young kid phase, right? Those first like ages 0 to 5, you're just like kind of hunkered down in your own world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
And
was
then afterwards
chaos.
you start coming out and like it becomes like a real like joy to have that like community part.
I think for me, it's so different. Like my family, when I was younger, we didn't frequent the masjid for Ramadan. It just wasn't a thing. We would go for Eid, and during the last 10 nights, we would go, but it wasn't, such like a thing to look forward to. And I think like that's my perception of Ramadan is that it moved from being like a chore or like a task, like, oh, I'm obligated to do this thing, to now being like, oh, actually, I understand why this is happening. It's a way to, find peace within yourself, but also build community. And now that you have kids, I think it's, having your kids looking forward to, hey, I want to go and break my fast there because,
Yeah.
so and so is going to be there. I think that's to me, that's
Yeah.
pretty exciting.
I had a very similar experience growing up because my whole family would like we would do iftar together, which is really fun. But then like my dada would lead the tarawih and do it himself at home. So like, and man, as a kid, tarawih is like infinity. You're like, oh, this is never gonna end.
I kind of had the opposite experience. Like I was living in the masjid more or less. Like we
No
would go for
way. As a
Tarawih,
kid,
we would go. Definitely, we were going lots of iftars at the masjid too, or like midday, like we'd go for Zohar or something. Like
you guys
it's
live
always
next to it. Like, how close were you? Like, this is like
5 minutes. Yeah, 5 7 minute
Wow.
drive, like really close. Yeah, that
Wow.
was like one of the parameters and where my dad and mom wanted to live always too.
I've also been thinking about like the meta point of Ramadan that as from a human perspective, we're creatures of habit. What I think it is meant to do is to break your habits and have you relearn habits, right? Rebuild good habits potentially, and then break bad ones. And it's like a resetting point. Like it will, no matter what your habits are, go to the gym, go to work, how you eat, what you eat, all of
Yeah,
that just like gets a
It's
hit reset button.
Yeah, like I feel like in startup land, it's like the ultimate disruption, right?
Totally.
Like to the
Yeah, it's
status
like
quo, right?
totally. It's like you will get disrupted by design. And
Yeah.
I
yeah.
think it's a very beautiful thing in the sense that you have to relearn how to build habits again. Like coffee, right? I picked up coffee this year
hmm
and it's gonna go away again. And I have a chance to like get rid
hmm
of that again. So
What's also
Yeah.
beautiful is how like everybody's able to do it.
yeah.
Like
Yeah. And everybody in your community is kind of going through it. So you're like, all right,
yeah.
it's just happening by default. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like it's easy, but it is way easier to fast in Ramadan than like if you randomly pick
But yeah.
a day.
Dude, any
Like
random other day, you're like,
yeah,
why am I doing
and
this?
you'll have like smokers or you'll have like people with like very serious habits that like are just able to walk away from it, and I think that is really like it's a blessing and it is really beautiful. And like how do you maintain it after, right? Like I think that's like the hardest part. Like how do you sustain that level of
Yeah,
discipline?
totally.
That's always hard. So, okay, looks like what I'm hearing is Ramadan still has the same meaning, just in a different lens for our families. So I think like that leads me to kind of our third area that I want to talk about. And I think this is really important to tie together, belonging in Ramadan is like this idea of identity whiplash. You're not Muslim enough in that space. Maybe you're too religious in those, non-Muslim spaces. How do you navigate? Any thoughts there?
I mean, I think the dual identity part was such a big part of my
Same. Yeah.
existence. Yeah, like growing
It's
up.
still, I don't know, in some ways continues to be, right? Like it just has taken different forms. Like this being authentic thing, like just be truly authentic feels like a farce almost.
I feel like I can show up and say very comfortably, I'm fasting
Yeah,
in a way that I definitely didn't even maybe 10 years ago, like,
sure.
or just say that I'm I'm
Or
Muslim,
you don't drink, or you don't drink, or whatever,
or
right?
I
Like
don't drink. Yeah, like I
whatever.
think,
Like it's easy to do those things now.
yeah.
Then
But growing up as a kid, like, yeah, I had a totally different identity at home versus at school versus at the masjid. And I see my kids, and so far, and this is something that like I really want to focus on for them. Like I think they have more of a uniform identity. They'll like talk about being Muslim or talk about their American identity. Like it's much more like normal, and maybe because they have parents that are like, grew up here. But I think it's also the acceptance. Like, thinking about the difference between how I felt seen versus my kids. As an example, my daughter, her teacher last year wore this crescent necklace around the time Ramadan started, just she wanted to like make my daughter feel seen, and just out of love. And it's like, dude, that's amazing. Like, I don't think my teachers even knew about
yeah.
Ramadan.
Well,
Right.
my son went and like told his teacher
Yeah,
and made sure that it's on the calendar because they have other holidays on the calendar, and she was happy
yeah.
to do it. And like that's
Yeah.
amazing. I'm like, we'll be like, hey, like don't like we would be in such a different spot. Like we'd be like,
Such a
we're
different
never gonna
spot.
mention this.
Yeah, my son, last couple of years, he's been so excited about Ramadan and what it means that he's taken like these little packets with like a date inside and he's passed it out to his classmates. Again, like our kids are so amazingly resilient. They're being raised in an age where they're so comfortable with their identity. And I think that's something we didn't have, whether it was trauma passed on by previous generations. But I'm glad that our kids are past that trauma, right? Their traumas will be something else, but at least it's not their identity. So
These things are really delicate. So it's like I feel really fortunate that we have it, and I hope it continues because it can change in any way.
but talk about being seen. Home Goods, where the average middle-aged shopper shops, they have
Okay.
Ramadan decor, like full on. I remember like growing up, it would be impossible to find any place to talk about Ramadan, right? And like now we have places that are actively supporting it, commercializing it.
Yeah.
So, there is a little bit of whiplash because, for all of us, it's probably like, wait, it's okay to be Muslim. It's okay to show our identity.
Yeah. Well,
So I do
Target has like a
battle it.
Ramadan line. A lot of the big retailers have Ramadan lines, and I think it all comes down to economics, right?
Yeah.
Like,
But do you think we're just getting like pimped out and commercialized? Should we welcome it? Should we not
I think
participate
if
in
it
it?
doesn't cross our values, like it doesn't cross a line in terms of doing something to offend Muslims, I think it's a good thing. Being a part of mainstream commercial America is like that's just kind of like that's normal. American values are centered around a lot of these types of things, and that's okay.
So does that mean you feel enough now? You feel like you're being seen, or do you
I think we
proceed
still have a
cautiously?
long ways to go. I think we're just in, wave like two right now. You have immigrant generation, you have first generation. I think in the next 30 to 50 years is going to be very different. And I think we still don't have large institutions. We don't have large universities, hospitals, so many other things that, we can build and, do good for the community, both Muslim and the broader community. And I think I think we're starting to see that. And that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I think that's a interesting. As we prosper in the community, we have to have a broader impact on the rest of the community in a way that is congruent, right? Like if it's so divergent from the broader community, then it can have a very negative impact in the long run, right? So I don't know like how to reconcile that. So again, right, going back to like belonging versus fitting in,
Right.
I think we'll have to struggle with that as a broader community as well.
But I think it's all like part of this journey, and it's a good thing. And it is like the example of the prophet, peace be upon him, was like, there's a roadmap for that. And we don't have to like recreate these things. Contrary to what nonsense narratives will try to say about Muslims in America and what they're trying to do. Like, I think we have such good work we are doing, a lot of Muslims are doing, and I think we can do more of. And I think it like is similar to the good work that like so many communities are doing, right? Like be it Asian community, the African American community, Hispanic community, so on and so forth. So like there's a lot of like, I think kind of goodness that comes out of that.
Okay. So I got some rapid fire for you to close out. Iftar at the mosque or iftar at home?
At home for me.
Same,
Yeah.
hands down.
I think I'm kind of the same. If you could give one tip to mosques for Ramadan or iftars, what would it be?
Loaded question, my guy. One tip to the mosque. Think about as broad community engagement as you can and think outside of like the protocol or methods you have always employed.
And but there are people who like make an exception for water. So deal with it.
Yeah, I'm more tactical. Let the young kids run your social, like get the word out. They're cool, they're hip. Let them do it.
If we're getting tactical, I'll give you a very tactical one. Let the young
Ooh.
kids just run around.
Well,
Like, just let them be
Literally,
children.
yeah. Don't get
let them be kids. Let
Yeah.
them be kids. Yeah. All right, next question. Do you go to bed after your suhoor or pre-dawn meal, or do you stay awake?
Are we talking
I go to
summer
bed.
or are we talking winter?
Just in general. Why do you have to add so much? Like, just answer the question.
Dude.
Yeah, I tried to go to bed. It doesn't work. I just lay
I
there
stay
with my
up.
eyes.
I stay up.
I go to
Sajid, what do you
bed.
got?
I
Yeah,
fall
of course.
asleep.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Next one. Favorite iftar meal?
Hands down, pakoras.
It has to be pakoras, right? It has to be pakoras and
That's not a
samosas.
meal. That's an appetizer.
I could
Okay.
eat all of it.
I think
Sorry.
throw in some patties too. Those are like amazing.
I mean, that stuff is so good, but
Still good, but so bad.
so
Same time.
bad. Trying to avoid that stuff.
But I think you're not really enjoying it if you don't do it, you know?
I think that's
So-
the whole idea, right? Enjoy Ramadan, the big rager.
All things equal, an early sahur or a last minute sip of water.
Last
Early
minute
sahur.
sip of water.
No, man.
Yeah.
I'm waking up early for sahur and eating
Wow.
so much. Like an hour before.
Sajid's going to sahur fest to hang out with like the 20-year-olds.
Hell no.
So
But I think I'll wake up half an hour at the beginning of Ramadan, and like by the last 5, I'm just like
dude,
barely making it to the water.
Well, if you guys grew up going to the masjid, you would know that if you wake up 2 hours early, you could pray tahajjud, you
oh
could
wow.
read Quran, and then you
Wow.
can eat your meal.
Dude, I had no idea you were doing all this.
I mean, I think we should cap it there. That's a wonderful end note. You know, my takeaway for everyone is belonging isn't set in stone. It changes and adjusts to who you are as you find out more about yourself. Surround yourself with people that bring enrichment into your life. And how blessed are we that, you know, we have that enrichment and support system built into us as we head into such a big, prosperous month of Ramadan. One quick note from me before we close out. You know, there's a lot going on in the world today, but I think what needs to get said that has gotten lost over time, especially in our virtual worlds, is people need to relearn how to feel sadness, feeling sad for other people's sadness, and feeling happy for other people's happiness. I think that aspect, the internet and mobile devices have sort of ruined our humanity. And if we can rediscover that, whether it's in the month of Ramadan, whether it's outside of that, whatever your spirituality may be, I think that's a big, big to do for everyone. Thank you so much, Nonsensers, for joining in this lovely conversation. Ramadan Mubarak from us, if you're celebrating. And last but not least, rate, follow, and subscribe. We are at Nonsense Show on Instagram and YouTube. Also send us email. We love reading fan mail. We are nonsenseshow@gmail.com. Big thanks to my co-host Twiddle D and Twiddle Dum, and also a big host to the producer who always keeps us on track. See you later, Nonsensers.
Thank you, Salman.
Peace.
Thank you.
Ramadan Mubarak. Ramzan Mubarak.
Thanks, Salman.